One of NBA YoungBoy's closest associates was just charged with murder, and the internet is already asking the question nobody can stop talking about. Is this finally the move that brings the whole never broke again empire crashing down? Could federal prosecutors be using this murder charge as the first domino in a RICO case that takes down one of the biggest names in streaming history? Fam, we are about to break all of it down. The arrest, the charges, the federal history, and the real legal question everybody is dancing around, but nobody is actually answering straight. Yo, what is good, fam? Welcome back. Today we are going deep on the arrest of P. Young Jin, Peter Davis, a Never Broke Again affiliate who just got booked in Louisiana on a principal murder charge. And before the blogs write the whole story for you, we are going to tell you exactly what happened, what the charge actually means under Louisiana law, what it does not mean, and why the federal RICO narrative that has been lighting up YouTube and Twitter does not quite hold up the way people are presenting it. We are going to separate the facts from the fiction, the verified from the speculation, and give you the full picture. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into Peter Davis himself, you have to understand the world this story lives in, because none of this makes sense without the backdrop. Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden, NBA YoungBoy, grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Not just in Baton Rouge, but in the kind of environment where the violence was not background noise. It was the daily reality. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade at Scotlandville High School and ended up writing lyrics while he was locked up in a juvenile detention center in Tallulah, Louisiana for robbery. That debut project, Life Before Fame, dropped in 2015. From that moment, the streaming numbers told a story that most of the music industry was not ready to hear. By his early 20s, YoungBoy had become one of the most watched artists on YouTube anywhere in the world. Not just in rap, not just in the South, but globally, outperforming artists backed by massive major label machines. His label, Never Broke Again, became more than a business. It became a cultural identity for an entire generation of fans who felt the rawness of his storytelling in their bones. But here is where it gets real. YoungBoy's rise was completely inseparable from his legal history, and law enforcement knew exactly who he was long before the mainstream caught on. In 2016, he was arrested in Baton Rouge for aggravated assault with a firearm and pled guilty to that felony charge in May of 2017. In 2020, police raided a music video shoot and arrested him again on drug and weapons charges. Then in 2021, the FBI got involved. Federal agents arrested YoungBoy for possessing a firearm as a convicted felon, which as a federal charge carries a completely different weight than a state case. That federal matter was eventually transferred from Louisiana to Utah, where Gaulden had relocated his family. He pled guilty to possessing a firearm while being a convicted felon as part of an agreement resolving two separate sets of federal charges, one in Louisiana, one in Utah, and was sentenced to nearly 2 years, later serving time under home confinement, followed by 60 months of federal probation and a $200,000 fine. Multiple federal and state agencies had been watching his movements for years. Then on May 28, 2025, something significant happened that fundamentally changed the legal landscape around YoungBoy. President Donald Trump issued him a full federal pardon. In a statement posted directly to his social media, Gaulden said he wanted to thank President Trump for giving him the opportunity to keep building as a man, as a father, and as an artist. The pardon covered his federal convictions in both Louisiana and Utah, wiping out the charges that had defined and constrained his legal life for nearly a decade. He had a tour schedule. He was free. And for the first time in years, it looked like the legal chapter might genuinely be closing. The pardon was part of a broader wave of clemency that also included reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley and a commutation for Chicago figure Larry Hoover. YoungBoy was officially a free man. Federal supervision lifted. A clean slate on the federal level. That brings us to now. And this is where the story the blogs are telling starts. Enter Peter Davis, known online and in music circles as P. Young Jin, a young rapper who had been affiliated with Never Broke Again as a signee. In March of 2026, Davis was arrested in Texas on marijuana and loaded firearm charges. That arrest generated some online attention, but did not blow up the way the second one did. Then in late June 2026, Peter Davis was booked into the Evangeline Parish Sheriff's Detention Center in Louisiana. His bond was set at $150,000. The charge, principal to a 2024 homicide. And fam, That is when the internet went absolutely nuclear. But here is where we got to address something before the narrative gets ahead of the facts. The specific legal language of this charge matters enormously, and it is the detail that almost every YouTube channel covering this story glossed over completely. In Louisiana, a principal charge does not mean that prosecutors are alleging Peter Davis pulled the trigger. Under Louisiana's principal statutes, Louisiana Revised Statutes Title 14, Section 24, a person can be charged as a principal to a crime if prosecutors believe they aided, abetted, counseled, commanded, encouraged, or in any way procured the commission of the offense, even without being physically present at the scene. This is the role prosecutors are currently alleging Davis played in a homicide that investigators say took place back in 2024. Not the shooter, not necessarily the planner, a principal, someone allegedly connected to the crime in a legally significant but potentially secondary way. And here is the detail that tells you even more about where this case currently stands. The bond is $150,000. Let that sink in for a minute. For context, a standard first-degree murder charge in Louisiana involving a contract killer or an organized hit typically carries bond in the range of $500,000 to $1 million, or no bond at all. $150,000 is notably significantly low for that kind of allegation. The bond amount itself is a signal from the court about how prosecutors are currently framing Davis's alleged involvement. It suggests they are proceeding on a secondary involvement theory, an accessory or principal role in someone else's act, rather than treating him as the individual who personally carried out the killing. That distinction matters legally, and it matters for the narrative being built around this case online. Now let me break down for y'all exactly how that online narrative developed, because it did not come out of nowhere. Peter Davis had been publicly affiliated with Never Broke Again. He appeared in music content connected to the NBA circle. He was visible in the ecosystem that surrounds Youngboy's world online. And the moment his booking hit public records, channels like Street Juice TV and independent commentators had already constructed an entire architecture around it. P. Youngin was not just a young rapper who caught a serious charge. He was being reframed as a top hitman, an enforcer allegedly executing street orders passed down from the leadership of Never Broke Again. The narrative was not based on court documents. It was not sourced from law enforcement briefings. It was built from the same combination of public association, social media presence, music affiliation, and speculation that has powered viral hip-hop content for years. But here is where it gets interesting, because that framing did not develop in a vacuum either. That perception of Youngboy's circle as an organized enterprise with street-level enforcers has been built piece by piece over years of public rap feuds, documented violent incidents involving rival Baton Rouge groups, aggressive social media exchanges between camps, and music lyrics that, when taken at face value, describe street violence in graphic and explicit terms. Youngboy's feuds with artists and groups from his city were not quiet. They played out publicly, loudly, and with real-world consequences that went far beyond music. Multiple people connected to those conflicts ended up injured, arrested, or worse. And each time something violent touched someone in that orbit, the narrative grew a little larger, a little more detailed, a little more convincing to the audience consuming it. The image of Never Broke Again as something more than a record label was constructed not in any courtroom, but in the comment sections, the reaction videos, and the blog posts that followed each incident. And that image is exactly what channels are now activating with this P. Youngin arrest. Now let's talk about RICO, because that word is everywhere right now in connection to this story. And most people throwing it around do not have a clear picture of what it actually requires. The Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act was passed by Congress in 1970, and it was originally designed as a tool to dismantle the organizational structures of the American mafia, not to prosecute individual criminal acts, but to go after entire enterprises. Under RICO, federal prosecutors do not just charge a person for a single crime. They attempt to prove the existence of an enterprise, a structured, ongoing organization, engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity over an extended period. The key word is pattern. Prosecutors have to demonstrate that multiple criminal acts were not random or isolated, but were connected, coordinated, and committed in service of the broader organization's goals. That is an extraordinarily high evidentiary bar, and it takes years of sustained investigation to meet it. The real tea that got everybody shook is the recent history of RICO prosecutions in the music industry. because that history is real and it is serious. The most high-profile example is the Young Slime Life case, YSL, where Young Thug and dozens of associates were indicted in Georgia in 2022. On RICO charges, prosecutors in that case spent years building their file. They used wiretap communications capturing alleged criminal discussions. They pulled financial records showing money movement connected to alleged criminal enterprise activity. They gathered social media evidence, posts, videos, direct messages that they argued demonstrated coordination. They obtained testimony from alleged co-conspirators who became government witnesses. They documented individual incidents of violence, drug trafficking, and weapons offenses, and argued each one was a brick in the larger enterprise structure. That case took a decade of groundwork before a grand jury was ready to hand up that indictment. Rapper Casanova faced federal RICO charges connected to the Gorilla Stone Nation gang network, with prosecutors building a similar web of documented criminal association and coordinated activity across multiple states. The federal prosecution of the 9 Trey Bloods used recorded jailhouse calls, digital evidence from seized phones, and witness testimony to connect members to a pattern of coordinated criminal conduct. In every single one of these cases, without exception, the foundation was years of documented, verifiable, court-admissible evidence connecting specific people to specific acts carried out explicitly in service of an organized criminal enterprise. Now, this is where we got to address the gap between those cases and what some internet commentators are claiming about Never Broke Again right now. The argument being made online is essentially this. YoungBoy has years of violent feuds tied to Baton Rouge. Multiple people in his orbit have been arrested for serious crimes. His lyrics reference violence explicitly. His associates have visible criminal records, and now one of them has been charged with murder. Therefore, the theory goes, federal prosecutors could be assembling all of this into a pattern that eventually leads to a RICO indictment naming YoungBoy himself. That argument is not completely irrational on its surface. Federal agencies have acknowledged monitoring the Never Broke Again circle. YoungBoy himself has referenced law enforcement attention in interviews and on record. The ingredients that commentators are pointing to, the feuds, the arrests, the associations, are real documented facts, not fabrications. But here's what those commentators consistently and critically leave out of the analysis. Under United States federal law, being close to someone who commits a crime is not a crime. Associating with people who have criminal records is not a crime. Making music that references violence is not prosecutorial evidence of criminal conspiracy. To legally establish RICO liability, or any form of criminal conspiracy charge against NBA YoungBoy specifically, federal prosecutors would need explicit documented evidence showing that Golden directed, financed, planned, or knowingly participated in criminal acts as part of an organized enterprise. They would need wiretapped audio capturing him issuing directives. They would need financial records showing payments for illegal activity traceable back to him. They would need cooperating witnesses willing to testify under oath that they received instructions from him to commit specific crimes. Guilt by association is not guilt under American law. That is not an opinion or a technicality. That is the constitutional framework that governs federal prosecution. And any federal prosecutor who tried to bring a RICO indictment on the basis of social media speculation and music lyrics would have it thrown out before it ever reached a jury. The real kicker, though, is YoungBoy's actual current legal standing. Because of the federal pardon issued in May 2025, Golden's documented federal legal obligations, the supervised release, the probation terms, the federal oversight that have followed him since his 2021 arrest have been cleared. His federal convictions in Louisiana and Utah are gone. He is not currently facing any active federal murder conspiracy prosecution. He is not named in any publicly filed indictment connected to the P. Youngjin case. His documented legal history consists of firearm offenses and a prescription drug fraud matter, not murder conspiracy charges. As of July 2026, Peter Davis's case is being handled as a state-level matter in Louisiana. No federal agency has released any documentation linking this specific 2024 homicide to directives or financing from NBA YoungBoy. For y'all who might not understand why these narratives become so powerful even when the legal facts do not support them, let me explain how this ecosystem actually works. Hip-hop media has developed a very specific content model around artists with controversial public images. Confirmed criminal cases involving associates get combined with ongoing street rumors, with social media activity, with music lyrics, and with fan theories to construct stories that feel authoritative and cinematic even when significant portions of them are speculative. The comments section of every video covering a case like this is full of people who treat internet commentary as inside knowledge. The channels that present speculation most confidently get the most engagement, and when those channels have covered the same artist for years, building an incremental narrative with each new incident, the cumulative impression they create in viewers' minds can be extraordinarily powerful. Even if no single piece of it has ever been proven in the court of law, that is not unique to hip-hop. It is how viral media works across every genre and every subject. But it is particularly intense around artists like YoungBoy, whose public personas are built around authenticity to street life. Because the line between the music, the image, and the actual legal facts is one that the content model actively profits from blurring. Now, this ain't just about the online commentary. This is about the real-world impact that arrests like P. Youngjin's have on YoungBoy's career and business, even when no legal connection exists. Every time someone publicly associated with Never Broke Again catches a serious charge, it generates a new wave of headlines, reaction videos, and press coverage that collectively reinforce the image of chaos and danger surrounding the brand. That image has tangible commercial consequences. Venue promoters become more cautious about booking, potential corporate partnerships, endorsements, brand deals, licensing agreements involve more scrutiny or get passed on entirely. Streaming platforms and distribution partners watch the news cycle carefully. Artists considering signing to NBA weigh the association differently. The reputational damage from repeated high-profile arrests in an artist's orbit compounds over time regardless of whether that artist is personally implicated in a single case. YoungBoy received a federal pardon and started a tour. He was, by every legal measure, moving forward. But every time the blogs can credibly link a murder charge back to someone in the circle, the conversation gets reset. The cloud does not fully clear. Peter Davis himself is a 17-year-old facing a principal to homicide charge in Louisiana for an incident from 2024. Whatever the outcome of that prosecution, whether he is convicted, whether the charges are reduced, whether evidence emerges that changes the nature of the allegation, he is the one whose life and freedom are directly on the line right now. The viral narrative around his arrest has largely buried that reality under speculation about his famous associate. But the legal reality is that Davis faces serious potential consequences entirely independent of any larger story. A principal to murder conviction under Louisiana law can carry sentences comparable to a direct murder conviction depending on the circumstances and the degree of involvement prosecutors can establish. His March 2026 Texas arrest on marijuana and firearm charges already created a prior record that prosecutors in the Louisiana case will be aware of. The picture being painted in court will have nothing to do with YouTube channels and everything to do with what investigators found in the 2 years since the 2024 homicide they are now prosecuting. At the end of the day, what this case really comes down to is the question the title of this video raises directly. Could the murder charge against one of YoungBoy's close associates be the beginning of the end for NBA YoungBoy? Here is the straight answer. Based on everything in the public record right now, no. No public federal indictment currently alleges that NBA YoungBoy ordered, financed, or directed this specific homicide. No charging document names him as a conspirator in Peter Davis's case. His federal legal slate was wiped clean by a presidential pardon in May 2025. The murder charge against Davis is being prosecuted at the state level in Louisiana as a localized case. And the legal standard required to connect an associate's independent criminal act back to a label head, actual documented evidence of conspiracy, not association, not affiliation, not proximity, has not been met publicly by anything in this case. What is true is that the internet's fascination with this story is not going away, because the larger question, whether Never Broke Again represents something more than a record label, whether the pattern of arrests and violence around YoungBoy's world is coordinated or coincidental, whether federal investigators are building something that has not yet surfaced publicly, is a question that has never been definitively answered. Courts have not answered it. Law enforcement has not answered it publicly. And in that space of unanswered questions, the content will keep coming. The speculation will keep building. And every new arrest in that orbit will be treated as another piece of evidence for a case that may or may not ever be filed. The real question going forward is whether the story the internet is telling about Never Broke Again ever intersects with the story a grand jury is willing to hear. Right now, those are two very different stories. And until that changes, the line between documented criminal case and viral speculation is one that every single person watching content about this situation needs to draw for themselves. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think P. Youngin's arrest is an isolated case, or do you believe investigators are building something much bigger? And hit the video on screen for more breakdowns just like this one.